Jen, is Corky on? Did you get a hold of him, Jen? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. Good afternoon, Tom and Clayton. We do have a little cleanup item from this morning. So if you guys could be on standby for a sec.
No problem.
Okay, if council wants to look in their email, we have the resolution requested from this morning.
Madam Chair,
Martin?
I believe that there should be a comma instead of a period on the dollar amount. Unless because I don't think it's 833 or
In the third
836.
paragraph?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that too. Well, we are kind of dull. Okay, Jen, there's some typos. First paragraph, first whereas should be duly recognized. Third paragraph, $836,336 per year.
Madam Chair.
Mike?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Weren't Numbers from this morning, 580,000 and 591,000.
Can you check on that, Jen, in the packet? Also, I believe preventative is misspelled. Okay, sounds good. Okay, we're ready to move on to non-member outdoor recreation use discussion. So we should have Tom, Dan, and Lester, and Clayton, and Rich. Okay, go ahead, gentlemen.
Madam Chair, I have Dan and Lester with me in my small cubicle office, but we're all healthy, so we feel good about that. We wanted to follow up on our last discussion with you. We had some planning sessions in July, but it was a little difficult. July is a tough month for doing meetings with people on leave, etc. It's a little bit of a difficult time of the year. Anyway, we were able to put together some additional ideas, options for council consideration to address the issues that have been coming forward to the council. As far as outdoor recreation, dispersed outdoor recreation on tribally owned lands and waterways. The pages that you have before you on 36 and 37, I believe, are a paper that we put together based upon our meetings. We reviewed the land use patterns and issues, and then I'll put it all in the backdrop of the perfect storm of the great migration that's happening here to Western Montana, with all the folks moving here. That some of it was quite anticipated, but all the baby boomers retiring, the COVID refugees, the climate change refugees, people being able to work remotely anywhere they have good Wi-Fi coverage. All those items where we've had this tremendous growth in visitation, but more importantly, permanent residents coming to the reservation in Western Montana. I think all of you know that, Kalispell, Whitefish, Missoula, and Bozeman are the fastest growing communities in the state of Montana. And so 3 of those communities are in our neck of the woods. So it's unprecedented. The amount of visitation on some of the major recreation areas like the Glacier and Yellowstone Park, even last month or the month of June, they increased their visitation by over 30% from the high mark of the previous years. So it doesn't appear to be much end in sight. There's been many editorials about people all over the state, longtime residents of Montana being pushed out of their favorite fishing hole, or just crowded out, just a lot of conflict over space. And so a lot of that we're seeing here on the reservation. So it is an appropriate time to review this and make some proposed changes as council sees fit to the outdoor recreation. Of course, this is specifically outdoor. It's not recommended for those tribal lands that are dedicated to sports fields, baseball fields, other things like the race car track, those type of places that the tribes have set up or have donated land in the past for outdoor recreation where it's developed, like the softball fields or city parks. I suppose that's one of the, in reviewing the way the tribes have operated here, it's kind of one of the disappointing things, because our tribes have always had broad shoulders, and we've always looked at outdoor recreation pretty importantly, and have given a lot, have shared a lot in the past to provide for people, given land to schools and for parks, and a lot of the places that the cities or other organizations manage today for us or own outright were donated by the tribes. So it's been a really strong, kind of an amazing trait that the CSKT tribes have had in the past. So it's difficult to look at this and think that You know, we're getting to the point with the population that we can't utilize our own landscape because we feel crowded out by the sheer number of non-tribal folks on the landscape. So with all those things in consideration, these issues and options, we basically identified 3 major issues. And then underneath each issue, there are different options the tribal council consider. These are just discussion points, thoughts for you to consider. They're all somewhat solutions for those issues. I might add this, that if it's a restriction that we're proposing, or if you would propose that would be related to non-member fishing or bird hunting, then we would need to run that through also our reservation state tribal fish and wildlife board for consideration. Their board meeting that was scheduled for this month was canceled, and will be redone in September, towards the end of September. So that's good for the process as far as vetting any proposed regulations that might be pursuant to that agreement. That gives us a little bit more time to develop anything. Most of these options related to these issues aren't restricting fishing or bird hunting. In fact, it's really concentrated on just access to the land, not the use on the land. So a lot of them, you'll see that that's the case. So if you go into the first issue, backcountry campsites are full. Tribal members are being displaced by non-member campers. One of the obvious solutions to that is to develop more camping areas, increase our capacity, develop areas that they currently don't have any that might be appropriate to do that. Example would be, well, we have a requirement now for the bison range to be open to the public in perpetuity, also to generate revenue to run the operation of the bison range. Is there a possibility to have a feed camping areas adjacent to or near on the bison range, associated with the bison range? Also, those places that might be down accompanied to a lot of different private land, or areas that have a lot of development already, like Flathead Lake shoreline. The other one that based on our capacity, number 2, is probably one of the easiest ones to recommend, given the fact that we're at capacity at most of the developed sites for a few years now. Would be simply to prohibit overnight camping by non-members and do away with the camping stamp, but allow a provision like we do for the South Fork, where you would allow tribal members, as any other property owner with their own property, as we all share it equally, they would be able to bring a guest with them, whether or not it would be a family member, an immediate family member or not, or a good friend. As long as they were in accompaniment with that adult tribal member, they were their guest, then they could engage in overnight camping with that tribal member. That opens up, all campsites just to tribal members, and it decreases that conflict over campsites. You would exempt those areas that are more commercially developed, like the Big Arm Marina. And then we also talked about those areas that might be beneficial to raise funding for their operation once, like, say, the powwows return. When you have a fully developed RV site at the powwow grounds, maybe there's an opportunity to utilize that to take some of the pressure off of the backcountry, expand the commercial nature of that to help fund the powwow itself. And then the tribal wilderness area, because of the perimeter of the wilderness, with the Forest Service landscape, the difficulty of leasing that landscape, it's probably better just to allow that as an opportunity for short-term camping, overnight camping. We could shorten up the length of stay for camping, but allow that to continue. The third option would be to hit those high use areas like Twin Lakes, Dog Lake, Mission Reservoir, McDonald Lake, and for that matter, it could be Blue Bay, and just close those specific sites down for tribal members only for overnight camping. Relieve that pressure. And then the fourth item is what we presented you before, is the implementing those tribal member only access areas that are identified in the forest plan for the various locations around the reservation. Is there any questions so far on that first topic?
So Tom, could you clarify what you said about the South Fork?
Excuse me. Well, the South Fork of the Jocko primitive area, tribal members are allowed to take their non-member immediate family members in there with them to camp. And as long as they're with them, that's allowable. So it'd be similar to the proposal about non-members in accompaniment of an adult tribal member. It would be similar to that, but with an expansion to friends or acquaintances. So an example would be Dan might have a good buddy, but his family might have one. Dan would pay a good friend to be his buddy. No, I mean, Dan has a good buddy that he camps with in the summertime. Historically been doing that at St. Mary's Lake. Is it possible for that to continue? Well, under that number 2, it would be possible as long as they were with Dan. They were Dan's guest and he was with them all the time. That non-member then could be in Dan's campsite and camp with him. It wouldn't have to be just an immediate family member that's a non-member status.
So I would personally agree to that for family members, but not Dan's good friend.
Well, Dan paid him a lot of money to be his friend.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the council. I think what I would also like to add to this is addressing access into the Lozo primitive area, the Lozo management area. There are numerous access points in there that I think we can close. I know some of them are public use, but I think for the purposes of trying to keep a lot of the non-members out of there, not only do we need to probably post up guards like they do in South Fork, but close some of these roads into there. So, thank you.
Anyone else? So I know you mentioned Blue Bay, but I didn't see it on number 3. But was that your intent to add Blue Bay to reserve overnight camping to tribal members only?
Madam Chair, it was just an example. It could be added, or it could be a full list of the sites where we have developments. That's a snapshot of some of the major sites, and so it could be expanded.
Carol?
Yeah, just due to the fact that we talk a lot about where tribal members can go on Flathead Lake. I'm hearing a lot of people say that they would like to see Blue Bay reserved for tribal members. But then there's a loss of dollars and income that we generate. So, I guess it'd have to be a discussion, part of the discussion.
So regarding Blue Bay, I stopped by there the other day and, I can't recall what the exact revenue is from non-members. But, I think if we were to look at developing that farmer, restaurant, bar, whatever it is, that lake house, I think that could bring in tons of revenue to make up for that lost revenue for non-members. Charmel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom, do you and your staff recommend that all of these options go to the public review process? Or how do you recommend engaging the membership?
Madam Chair, this, Shermo, this list was just a collage of potential actions the council could consider. Any one of them themselves could be implemented down the road, or a combination of them all could be. Some of these are redundant as you go through it, but I would hope that we could come to a discussion point this month to, a solid recommendation that we would scope to the public for recreational changes. Any recreational change, we need to go out for the 30-day notice in a public hearing. So the more concise it is, for me, the easier it is to explain and take public comment on. A wide range like this, as it's presented through these three issues and different examples, might be too much for that. But it would be my recommendation to narrow this down somewhat, and pick or choose some of the actions in here.
Go ahead, Len.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just reading through the document here. At least for me, when I see the term non-member addressed on here, the target audience that I was looking for was those out-of-staters that have just recently moved to the reservation, those ones that have just came in here, purchased up all the land, and are settling in here, and and I'll give you a good example of that. Not too long ago, I went to Blue Bay, and most of those license plates were Washington and California. And these were the people that were kind of being very disrespectful and things like that. And who knows how many of those are out on a river corridor. But I would want us to move careful on this when we're addressing non-members, because I would really hate to see us include those non-members that have lived on the reservation here for most of their lives, and have close ties to the tribal member families. And I know that's tough. That's really tough. That's going to be challenging to try to address that target audience that I just mentioned. But I mean, that's what I was thinking when we were wanting to move forward on this, because it was just a whole influx of out-of-state non-members that have just flooded us, and in some cases just literally kicking our tribal members off of these places, and because and you all know as well as I do, when our members go to enjoy a place, they want tranquility, and you can't get that anymore. You can't get that today just because of that situation. So anyway, I just wanted to let you all know about the what I was thinking about when we were referring to the non-member component.
So I think the one place you can is the South Fork, and that's why I'm really adamant about keeping it for tribal members and their non-member spouses or children. As far as the out-of-staters, I think we've seen so many people move here recently. I think it would include them. I heard a figure last week that was 50,000 new Montana residents from Flathead County to Bitterroot County. 50,000 new residents. And I don't know if that was electrical hookups or what, but I think Janet Camel was the one that gave me that information when we were at Res. So that's very concerning to me if that's included in our local residents now. So I think we need to really proceed with caution.
Yeah, Madam Chair. Just one point that I guess I would add to Len's comment. When I talked about all the people moving here for Western Montana, the new residents that are getting full-time residency, getting their cars registered and buying property and houses, They come from California, number one, Washington, number two, Colorado, number three, and then Texas. So that's the big four, and those are your new neighbors moving onto the reservation. So it's a huge, difficult task to, once they become a reservation resident, to be able to, ferret out that who's who, who's that long-term resident versus another one. When we get farther down in the other options here, you'll see that there's one recommendation for an application process where you set carrying capacities for different areas, and then you can have people apply for a permit to utilize the landscape. And that might be a screening tool to get to that point if you want to. But at some point in time, as much as I hate to say it, and as concerning as everything that's been stated so far, there is no end in sight to the people moving here. And so there is a capacity to your open space. There is a capacity to your developed recreation area. There is a capacity to St. Mary's Lake and what it can handle for use. So at some point in time into the future, just like they set a carrying capacity on the Going to the Sun Road in Glacier Park, where they set a carrying capacity to float the Smith River in central Montana, you're going to have to be looking at carrying capacity limitations, and how you're going to have the winners and the losers in that is a difficult question. It's very tough. There's those other points that I'm concerned about where we have employees. I would love to make sure that employees that work for our tribes or our corporations can be able to, as a fringe benefit, have access to our properties also. That's an important thing for employment and drawing certain folks here to help us with our goals and missions. So there's just a lot of different questions, but the starting point would be incremental baby steps, and work your way towards it. It's really easy to pick on the non-resident out-of-state folks and restrict them, but at this point in time, as we go into the next issue, the perception that many non-member recreationists are not licensed and doing illegal activities. According to Dan's notes, with over 2,000 checks, it's 97% compliance rate on people having a rec permits, and that majority of those are non-resident visitors. They're from the region or they're from out of state, so they're very compliant with the regulations right now. It's just that they're showing up in places we're not used to seeing them. They're engaged in legal activities. It's just that it's new. There's just so many people coming here. They're looking, trying to find places. They're being displaced from Glacier Park. They're being displaced from other locations, and they're ending up here on the reservation. So as you look at this capacity one for the second issue, in illegal activities perception, this is where we went into the last presentation: increase full and part-time warden positions, increase our daily presence in the field. And we gave you a cost estimate of what it would cost per warden. And then number two, create 2 portable warden staff or gate guard staff visitor check stations. We actually put in the budget for this upcoming year one cost for a small RV would be used as a mobile station that we could move around as hotspots and do checks, make sure people are in compliance. Put it in places where we have problems, we would improve compliance that way, where we're doing local patrols out of it, or just that presence. And this item number 2 would create 2 of those, just double down on that to help us with that objective. Number 3 is, if you get into managing the capacity of an area for a certain number of people, like they do on the Smith River or Glacier National Park, then you probably have to have gate guard residences. And having a residence is something of a deterrent in itself that increases compliance. People driving by someone that's living at an entrance of a road, checkpoint, they behave differently when there is nothing there at all. So, providing permanent check stations at certain recreation areas such as a couple of the river sites or the Mission Reservoir or McDonald Lakeside and the Mission Front. That might be worthwhile to consider. But when you look back at the current compliance of people having a permit, to say you're at 97% on the last check of over 2,100 checks, and issuing only 59 citations. That rate of compliance is pretty good. It's certainly something that a lot of law enforcement agencies or areas would love to have. So investing a lot of money to increase that 97% to 100% may not be our best bet for financial reward, but it could be for impacts, because it only takes one person to do some really horrible things out there. So it's a hard one to kind of raise out. Number 4, and I think Madam Chair has raised this before, is to, where feasible, we would put in live remote camera coverage. So those places where we could have self coverage and we could have monitor those cameras for visitor use activity and compliance, we would start putting those in different locations where we can, and increase our response to potential illegal activity by doing that. Number 5, I got to mention this. When we went and Lester paid for these big, huge vandal-proof signs that are solid 1/2 inch sheet metal that are cut out.
Ellie has a question really quick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom, above where it says on the 97% compliance rate, so when we did the COVID gate closures and there were so many folks stopped without permits, if that's true then to say that a majority of those were the local residents? And
That was true. Yes, that would be true. It would be mostly local residents that weren't in compliance. Yes.
So I just wonder, with the 97% compliance rate, that's for those people that were checked, right?
That's correct. And they were ticketed if they didn't have one. And then they were, some of them were given the option to buy a license to make themselves legal on top of, their fine that they were going to have. So of the 59 folks, some of those people then ended up buying a license.
Okay. So with that, I guess I would just question the check rate, because the times that I've been in the South Fork, one time, or I've seen one fish and game officer in the South Fork, and that was Chib at Crazy Fish Lake. The rest of the Jocko, I think the last time I saw a game warden was Tom Haynes at Eva Paul. And I spend a lot of time up Jocko. And so I just question those numbers. That 97% compliance rate is just for those checks. But yeah, I've had several incidents in the Jocko where it would have been nice to have, access to a game warden, or, I think the land monitors last year during COVID helped in that process, as far as stopping them at those main access areas. But yeah, Anita?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I look at what some of the elders have been sharing with us, and 2 or 3 complaints that we've had from up north about individuals using our land for their businesses. On number 2, I think this is where we've talked before about the increase of recreational permits for non-residents. I do not believe $100 is enough. They'll go to a park and pay $75 for one day. And what they're doing to the landscape, it's just unbelievable with their RVs and their razors and all their other stuff that they're doing recreating. You know, I think that we could use that extra money to get more staff and to get people at the gates. But I just don't know if it's worth what's happening to our resources. I've had individuals talk about closing it down for 5 years and letting it regenerate. And when you look at the cost of everything, trying to protect it, I don't know if it outweighs it. So I don't believe that, you know, the residents here, I've seen a lot of them that use Twin Lakes that are pretty respectful, but Freddie sat up here and said about the four-wheelers up there that ran him out of St. Mary's Lake. You know, I just think that we should have places as tribal members that are set aside. So I agree with Shelley there. And I think we should raise them prices up on these non-residents. You know, $100 isn't nothing. They'll pay for anything and they're parking wherever they want to. Half of these NRD places that like down at Moe's, they're pulling their trailers in there at night and parking. They'll park on a 10-foot area. So I don't know. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, Madam Chair. So the 97% compliance rate is for those checks that Dan's staff did last quarter. And so those are, you could say somewhat random. They may be concentrated in one area versus another, but Dan can provide that detail to you. It's certainly not set up as a statistically random site where we can say you know, in a 97% probability rate that everybody that's in this area will have a recreational license. No, it's just in that point in time, in those contexts that those wardens did, that was the compliance rate of those checks. So it certainly will vary, and it could go quite a bit lower than that, depending on the given situation or location, timing. The regulation signs, I was talking about those mean a lot. We believe that having the signs that stay up, that aren't torn down by vandals, means a lot. It helps a lot with citations and enforcement. So increasing the number of the metal signs across the landscape would certainly help also. And at those points of entry would be additionally looking at surveillance cameras. Number 6, I think, again, I think Madam Chair mentioned this one before, designate some areas that would move some of the uses that are impacting dramatically on certain landscapes, put it in a certain location that can be managed and relieve the pressure off of other spots. In this particular case, it would be an off-road ATV park. We looked at that before, but we were trying to find a nonprofit that would take that on for a liability cushion for the tribes, and we're unable to find one. The last issue is this increased daily number of recreation uses displacing our members. And this is really just a sheer number of people coming. And this is where you go into the items you might do that would, you know, lessen that particular issue. Number 1 is going way beyond the forest plan, but looking at those areas that is there really any reason for non-members to be up, you know, deep draw, or to be up Garso Gulch, or be at the top of Ferry Basin, or to be in these different locations that aren't really destination recreation areas, and what are they doing there to begin with? So it could be that we look at a lot of the commercial forest landscape and just close it down to just tribal member use, and post all those areas, or a good portion of them, closed to non-member use, and then focus on the valley areas, the irrigation system reservoirs, you know, other land parcels that have some strings tied to it for funding that came with it that allows public access, and those areas that are intermittent, along with a lot of private land, where that's where we focus on managing the non-member high use areas and close the rest of the landscape. Number two is basically a discussion point that Vice Chair Matt just mentioned. What is that threshold that these people are willing to pay? Will it decrease their numbers on the landscape, or will it provide a significant boost to the revenue from the ordinance 44D permits? That's just one example of $100 increase for non-residents of the reservation. So that would be your Missoula, Kalispell residents and any out-of-stater. It would not be reservation residents here on the reservation, basically. That's one example. That could be a win-win. It depends. A lot of these folks that are moving here that seem to have different attitude, particularly Texans. They're extremely wealthy. They wouldn't hesitate on a rec permit if they have a desire to go out on the landscape, whatever the fee was. Their attitude still may be as arrogant as they would be if it was free for them. In fact, it may be even more arrogant if you charge them more money. But that's one example of one demographic of people that are moving here. I don't mean to stereotype all Texans, but I mean to stereotype all Texans. Number three, for those recreation areas, the high use rates create a specific use stamp. We brought this up many years ago, having a river corridor stamp. Will be separate fee schedule to be on the river corridor, floating the river, boating the river, being on the shore, those access areas, and manage it in that way, similar to the way they do the Smith River, Glacier Park, going to the Sun Road. There's also a way you can create a use system to say non-members are allowed these days on top of the travel member use only. You can pick out segments of the week, months of the year, etc., and try to relieve some pressure there, provide some exclusion time for just travel members only on a landscape, separated out that way through time and space. And then there's also the application process that you could do, that you just apply for a permit. And there's a screening process that allows people to buy a rec permit and allow those long-term reservation residents the ability to still recreate. Number four is simply that one where, again, it's expanded to all the reservation landscape where, you know, you have to be accompanied by an adult tribal member from our tribes at all times, no matter where you're from or who you are. And that allows you to recreate on tribal land. And then you could have, you know, expansions for descendants. You want to do standalone for descendants, for them to acquire rec permits, have them on the landscape. Also, the employees of the tribes or corporations could be an example for their use. And of course, there's, for this one, the forest plan has some measures in there that will allow tribal member use only areas that would be like the South Fork, but created around the reservation. That's the expansion of what we had discussions on in our, I guess, 3 meetings that we held. In relationship to that, we had a lot of concerns about prescriptive easement from recreationists, concerns about employees, split families, descendants, long-term friends of the tribes that are residents of the reservation. Just a lot of discussion points. What does it mean to the community? Businesses, what does that mean to the tribal members for service? Is there any, you know, slight reactions to major closures by the reservation public? So there's a lot of issues surrounding that. And so it is super sensitive, and it is wise to take things with certain steps, a stepwise program into it. But given the volume of people moving here, the sooner certain steps are taken, the easier it will be for us to keep a handle on it. I'll ask Dan if Lester, they have anything to add. Lester, anything for Blue Bay? tribal members only. There was discussion about Blue Bay. So
I just know at this point, there's we do get a lot of migrant cherry pickers up there at this time. So a lot of Washington plates there. And we do have a lot of tribal members from Washington that come over here every summer too. So I think it's a little bit of mixture of both, that non-members and tribal members, Washington, Idaho come over.
one point I might add, and this is based on the complaint about Twin Lakes and people on their four-wheelers, ATVs, the one check, I guess it was this summer, there was a check by the wardens, and actually everybody that was there using their ATVs were all part of the tribal member families. So there is conflict between tribal members and uses. I don't know if you want to get in those kind of restrictions or not.
Bing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tom, I had a couple of calls concerning people's belongings being moved out of campsites up there and being stored up on top somewhere in an open area where other individuals are able to get at the belongings to the individual that's been moved out of a campsite. Is this really happening? Because you know, some of that stuff I heard from one individual that she lost something that was kind of important. So I didn't know whether or not you know, this was taking place, and how long are they given if their, you know, if their time is up on their in a particular campsite to get moved out?
Madam Chair, Bing, I'll let Dan and Lester answer this question, because Dan on the dispersed areas around the reservation could address it, and then Lester could address it at Blue Bay specifically.
Madam Chair, Councilman Matt. So there is times where we do remove campsites if they've been left unattended. If it's a tribal member, we try to make contact with them to remove their belongings after 30 days. Some of the stuff that we do, most of the stuff that we do remove has been abandoned beyond that 30 days, and bears have rummaged through it. Other people recreating had rummaged through it, and then it just turns into a big garbage pit. So then we pick that stuff up. If we don't know who it belongs to, we look through what is left there. And if we can identify the person, we contact them to clean it up, which we have done numerous times in the past with some tribal members that live in the woods all summer. If it's valuable, we bring it to the office and we hold it in hopes that someone will call upon it. But then after 30 days of holding it here in our compound, if it's something that could be used by someone else, we'll sometimes drop that item off at the Twice But Nice, or, you know, I'm talking like a tent or something that has no identifying marks or numbers. So usually with things that are left out there is trash or broken equipment. Right now we have a slide-in camper that's sitting at the North Fork campsite where the horses are to be unloaded and whatnot. We do know who that belongs to. We notified her to remove it. She still hadn't done it as far as I know, but I haven't been back up there this week. And it's items like that where if we need it moved and they refuse to move it, then we notify Mary Rose or Les and his crew to get it out of there so that other people can utilize those campsites.
As far as Blue Bay goes, our regulations state that people can, basically stay up there all summer as long as they move from the campsite after 14 days. So 14 days in one site, move somewhere else, and as long as they're in compliance with the rules, they can stay up there all summer as a tribal member, or if they're paid, they can pay and move around. Again, as long as they're in compliance with our rules. And one of the rules we have is campsites must be occupied nightly. That was changed. Initially, it was when we opened it up, it was you can't leave it abandoned for 24 hours. And we found that didn't work, and it was changed again by tribal council to have that occupied nightly. So people aren't just going up there putting up tents or campers and leaving them there, coming back on the weekend, which was happening a lot. People were doing that. And so if they're unoccupied every night, and we tell everybody when they come in there, it's stated on the rules, posted, it's on the back of the envelopes. And with such demand out there too, we have numerous campsites all summer that happens too. And we don't have contact information for these people. And sometimes it slips through the cracks. We don't know that they're out there. They're not out there occupying it, but in the event that we see that it's, and we document that it's been unoccupied for several nights, that we will take the camp down and put it up in the shed. And we bag it and tag it, the information that we know on there, and we'll leave it in there until if and when they come back for it. And one of our staff goes up there and identifies the items and gives it back to the people, their request. But there's a lot of camp stuff that gets left in there. We have several tribal members that are notorious about going up there and camping every summer and just leaving all their camp gear. And that became a real problem this spring with the bears that were out there. People left food and tents, and they were gone all over all the weekend. The bear got into it, then that bear got habituated and started sticking around and staying in the campground and going from campsite to campsite during the daytime, ripping into tents and getting into on tables, all their food and such on campsites. So it was something that's one of the issues. Besides, one of the main issues is just safety for everybody else, cleanliness, healthiness, and also just occupying it and other people can't use it, other tribal members or paying customers.
Bing?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the last report I had on this issue was just last week. And it was an individual that works up at Tribal Health as a nurse up there in Polson. And she said that she had the campground rented for 3 days and went back the second day and her belongings were all gone. And she said that they found them up the hill, I guess, and she wondered why their belongings were gone, or she had the campground rented for 3 days and went back second day after work, and her belongings were gone. So I told her, well, I'd talk to you guys about it. I guess now is as good as time as any to let you know what was reported to me.
I can certainly check into that if I had the name and campsite number and what day this all happened. I can check we have nobody out there right now. So the campground, due to the fire, the campground was evacuated Saturday night, and the road is closed. The power is out, and none of any staff. We have our wildland staff going up there and having to clean up and kind of keep an eye on it. But you have to go all the way around the lake to get out there right now. But I can certainly, if you could get me that information, Bing, I can certainly check in on it.
I'll text her name to Tom.
Sounds good.
Check. Same time as the record.
Madam Chair, so these are, a series of main issue points and various recommendations that could be considered by the tribal council. We wanted you to look at it, kind of go over it with you. Certainly we can revisit it back with council, or if council has some specific ideas beyond these. If you want us to come back with a strong recommendation for, a handful of these items to hit it hard, we can certainly do that too. But we wanted to try to provide a, wide variety of actions that could be implemented to help with some of the concerns that we're hearing on the landscape and the tribal council is hearing on the landscape. And based upon the future residents coming to our reservation in Western Montana.
Well, thank you for putting together these recommendations. I have a note to discuss it the next early district meeting. So I think we can get some good feedback at our district meetings on this. So, Len?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the council. Also, Tom, as we're developing this and moving forward, I would ask you to add the former Kathy Hamel property that the tribes now own to start looking at some restrictions for that site, because I know there's been a lot of members of the Elmo community, letting me know some of the significance of the area and how they would just prefer to allow tribal members to use that area. So, thank you.
Thank you, Len. Anyone else?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Tom.
could I respond to Len, please? Len, I had assumed that acquisition that it wasn't designated for some other use, that would be the maximum that it would be developed for, would be just tribal members only. So certainly we can have, Lester can work on a real brief little management plan for that. If there's improvements to be had for tribal member access to that parcel, we could look at that also. So, but I hadn't, unless there was some economic development thing, had not envisioned that parcel would be used for anything other than for tribal members only.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Okay, I don't see any other comments. Thank you guys for the info, and I guess we'll digest the information, get some tribal member input, and come back.
Madam Chair, we do have a internal staff meeting again on the same topic, and we'll have some other topics to it this Friday with Rick and Clayton and Rich and myself. So.
Okay, very good.
Lemlemsh.
Thank you. Carol? I'm just curious, since we're getting later in the season now to get any of this done, I'm wondering if we shouldn't be just planning for next year to implement and nail it all down, put it all together.
What would be our deadline for example, if we were going to take away the camping stamp?
Madam Chair, that's in the beginning of the paper. It alludes to the fact that that was our goal, would be, this would be actions that would be fully implemented come March 1st of 2022. And that we would run this all through our normal process of revising the regulations and vetting it through. If there was some regulations that were concerning non-member fishing or bird hunting, it would also be vetted through the Reservation Fish and Wildlife Board. So the timing's perfect now, especially since we have a board meeting that was canceled this past month, and it's going to be at the end of September. If we could have some solid recommendations done that we could take to the public for scoping in our requirements and the board's requirements, that would be great if that was done by the end of September. Then it would be fully vetted into December, and we'd print new regulations and change licenses and fees as needed. And it would be implemented March 1st, 2022.
Okay, while we're on that subject, did you want to mention the two vacancies on the board?
We do. We are Terry Tanner, of course, retired from the board, and Whisper Camel was on the board, and she could no longer do that as a program manager for the Natural Resource Department. So they were two of the three tribal member appointees from the council appoints to the Reservation Fish and Wildlife Board, and so we're looking for two replacements to sit on that governing board. So there's three non-tribal members appointed by the governor and one neutral party that's agreed upon by the state and the tribes. That's a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service appointee. That's the 7-member board. So it'd be great to get some folks on that board before the end of September.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take a 15-minute break if we can get Lance back at 2:15 for the land ordinance. Okay, let's deal with Corky's resolution first. Thank you, Tom, Les, Dan, Rich. Go ahead, Corky.
Oh, good afternoon. My evening's been quite hectic here trying to get everything straightened out here. So here I am again. So I'd like to get the resolution approved to apply for these funds. I heard there was a question on the amounts, but I didn't know exactly what the dollar amount that I was being questioned about. But I think believe you have the correct resolution in front of you now. I don't. So we're applying for the 836,336. Some of that will go, well, most of it will go towards operating funds. And then there's 58,000 of it that goes towards our preventive maintenance on resealing our bus barn area that's paved, and also redoing or sealing the roof on the transit office, and that'll be 58,000, which adds up to the 836,336. This funding is formula funding, and it goes from it's based off our mileage and our ridership on an annual basis.
Yeah, I think there was concern that the amount on the resolution didn't match with the amount in the packet that you gave us. So it says total eligible cost 591.
I don't, that's not the correct amount. I have the correct amount. I don't know how that got, I thought I emailed this one from FTA, which is an application on the grant. So it should be 836,000. which I can scan and send it. I'm sorry for taking your time and doing this. I thought I had the right dollar amount.
Let's see, 591.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I had the correct one sent to you guys. If there's,
Yeah, that's still not right.
so that's a 599, that is not the correct amount.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Martin.
I believe it is correct. There are 3 different amounts on there. There's a 210, a 35, and then the 591. And I believe all those combined are the 836. So I believe the resolution is correct. And with that, I'll make the motion to approve.
Okay, motion by Martin. Second by Bing. All those in favor? Okay, motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Corky.
Thank you for, I'm sorry about that. Thank you very much.
Have a good day. Okay, let's take a quick break till 2:15.
Madam Chair. Hey, I just want to do a quick public announcement to the tribal council. Kiowa and Cashola will have some t-shirts for sale that she's trying to sell. So if you're interested in order, I could email you all the order form. And they're just the t-shirts that she'll be making that has a Cooking with Kiowa logo on it. So, thank you.
We'll go ahead and get started. Go ahead, Mark.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Council. Would like to request to go into executive because this is the ordinance discussion again.
Okay, we'll go out of regular into executive.